December 8, 1941. Imperial Japanese Navy Headquarters, Tokyo, Japan. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita placed his teacup on the mahogany table and studied the intelligence brief with barely concealed contempt. His uniform was immaculate, his posture perfect, his expression dismissive. "Look at this," Kurita said, tapping the document with one finger. "The Americans think their submarines will matter." Commander Minoru Yacht nodded, adjusting his glasses. "Their submarine service is the refuge of misfits and failures. Real warriors serve on battleships." Captain Haruki Nishimura, Chief of Merchant Marine Protection, leaned forward with a data folder. "Sir, their submarine production capacity concerns me. The Americans are launching new boats at an alarming rate." But Kurita waved him off. "Their submarines are obsolete, their torpedoes are failures, and their crews are untrained. We sank 42 merchant ships in the first month of war. The British lost hundreds. The Americans have sunk 3 of our transports. 3. At Pearl Harbor, 8 battleships destroyed or damaged in 2 hours. In the Philippines, 96 American aircraft eliminated in the first day. At Wake Island, the garrison surrendered after 15 days. The mathematics were undeniable. Japan had achieved a 50-1 victory ratio in the war's opening weeks. What Kurita didn't know, what none of them could have known as they reviewed casualty reports in that conference room, was that American submarine warfare would destroy 1,178 merchant ships within 44 months. The numbers would become catastrophic. 55% of Japan's merchant marine eliminated, 4.9 million tons sent to the ocean floor, 30% of the Imperial Japanese Navy's warships destroyed by submarines. The contempt in that Tokyo headquarters would become history's most expensive miscalculation, measured in 10,543 Japanese merchant sailors killed, and an empire starved into submission. The 3 witnesses. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita, age 53, 28 years of service, veteran of every major naval operation since 1914. Kurita had commanded destroyers in the Great War, led cruiser divisions through the 1930s, and planned the southern operations that seized the Dutch East Indies in 60 days. He had studied American naval doctrine at the Imperial War College and concluded that American submarine crews lacked the warrior spirit necessary for effective combat. Kurita reviewed the American submarine specifications with professional derision. Their fleet boats were large, slow, and vulnerable. Japanese destroyers could outrun them. Japanese depth charges could destroy them. Japanese lookouts could spot their periscopes. "The Americans worship comfort over combat effectiveness," he wrote in his December 1941 assessment. "Their submarines carry air conditioning, ice cream machines, and comfortable bunks. Warriors require discipline, not luxury." He noted American torpedo failures at Pearl Harbor, where multiple submarines fired at Japanese vessels and scored 0 hits. He documented American tactical timidity, where submarines retreated rather than pressed attacks. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. Captain Haruki Nishimura, age 41, Intelligence Section, responsible for Merchant Marine Protection Analysis. Nishimura had spent 3 years studying American industrial capacity and reached conclusions that terrified him. His December 1941 report documented American submarine construction facilities, American steel production, American shipyard capacity. "The Americans are launching 1 new submarine every 12 days, he wrote. By December 1942, they will have 80 operational fleet boats. By December 1943, they will have 150. Nishimura's superiors dismissed his analysis as defeatist. "Quality defeats quantity," they responded. 1 Japanese destroyer equals 10 American submarines. But Nishimura kept detailed records, tracking every American submarine launch, every American torpedo test, every American crew training program. His files grew thicker each month, while his warnings grew more urgent and more ignored. Lieutenant Koji Yamamoto, age 28, anti-submarine warfare officer aboard the destroyer Ikazuchi. Yamamoto had participated in the Pearl Harbor operation, escorting carriers through submarine-infested waters without encountering a single American boat. He had patrolled the South China Sea throughout December 1941, protecting troop convoys, and detected 0 submarine contacts. His sonar operators were the best in the fleet. His depth charges were the most advanced in the world. His tactical doctrine was proven through years of training. "American submarines are cowards," Yamamoto wrote to his wife in January 1942. "They hide in deep water and refuse to fight. Our convoys pass unmolested because they fear our destroyers." Yamamoto had depth-charged 3 suspected contacts in January and received confirmation of 1 probable kill. The American submarine threat appeared manageable, perhaps even exaggerated by nervous merchant captains. At Midway, the Japanese lost 4 fleet carriers. At Guadalcanal, the Japanese lost 2 battleships. At the Philippine Sea, the Japanese lost 3 more carriers. The mathematics remained consistent. American surface forces dominated whenever they engaged, but Admiral Kurita continued dismissing submarine reports. "Aircraft and battleships win wars," he declared at a February 1942 staff meeting. "Submarines are auxiliary forces, useful for reconnaissance but incapable of strategic impact. History proves this. The German U-boat campaign failed in the Great War. The British submarine offensive achieved nothing against Germany. Submarines cannot defeat a great naval power." Commander Yock agreed enthusiastically. "The Americans have constructed submarines designed for crew comfort rather than combat effectiveness. Their torpedo failures prove their industrial inadequacy." Even Captain Nishimura, the perpetual warner, acknowledged that American submarines had achieved limited results through February 1942. 28 Japanese merchant ships sunk in 3 months represented an acceptable loss rate, less than 1% of the merchant marine. The Imperial Navy continued offensive operations, while merchant convoys continued delivering resources. American innovation. Manitowoc, Wisconsin, January 1942. Joseph McCarthy, plant manager at Manitowoc Shipbuilding Company, stood in a construction facility located 1,000 miles from the nearest ocean and watched workers assemble submarine sections. This single facility produced 1 complete fleet boat every 45 days. Every morning at 6:00 a.m., another submarine hull section rolled off the assembly line. Every afternoon at 2:00 p.m., another pressure hull completed welding. Every evening at 6:00 p.m., another diesel engine was installed. Manitowoc Shipbuilding was building submarines in Wisconsin and launching them sideways into the Manitowoc River, then sailing them through the Great Lakes, down the St. Lawrence Seaway, and into the Atlantic Ocean. The logistics were absurd. The results were devastating. In December 1941, America possessed 51 operational submarines in the Pacific Fleet. By December 1942, production reached 6 submarines monthly. By December 1943, production exceeded 8 submarines monthly. By December 1944, Manitowoc Shipbuilding alone was producing 1 submarine every 30 days. This single facility was producing more submarines than the entire Imperial Japanese Navy possessed. Dorothy Schneider, previously a seamstress at a Milwaukee department store, now operated a pneumatic riveting gun producing 847 rivets per 8-hour shift on submarine pressure hulls. Each rivet had to withstand 850 pounds per square inch of water pressure at 400 feet depth. She produced more submarine rivets in 1 shift than the entire Kure naval arsenal produced in 1 week. Her riveting team, 14 women between ages 19 and 54, assembled pressure hull sections that could dive deeper, sustain more damage, and operate longer than any submarine in history. Dorothy earned $1.85 per hour, worked 6 days weekly, and contributed $25 monthly to war bonds. She had 2 sons in the Army, 1 husband in the Navy, and 0 tolerance for mistakes. Her supervisor checked her work daily and found her riveting failure rate below 0.1%, better than pre-war professional riveters. She personally riveted sections on 16 submarines that would collectively sink 93 Japanese vessels. Her contribution exceeded the entire combat effectiveness of the Imperial Japanese submarine force. Marcus Washington, from Detroit, Michigan, operated a precision lathe that manufactured torpedo gyroscopes producing components accurate to 0.001 inches. His single station's daily output exceeded 17 gyroscopes, enough to guide 85 torpedoes. His single station's daily output exceeded the entire Yokosuka Naval Arsenal's monthly torpedo guidance production. Marcus had operated assembly line equipment at Ford Motor Company before Pearl Harbor, building automobile transmissions requiring similar precision. Converting his expertise from cars to torpedoes took 14 days of training. His productivity exceeded Japanese skilled technicians who had trained for years. Marcus worked the night shift, 10:00 p.m. to 6:00 a.m., alongside 247 other workers in a facility that operated continuously. The mathematics were straightforward. One American factory worker with 2 weeks of training outproduced 5 Japanese technicians with years of experience. The implications were catastrophic for any nation competing against American industrial capacity. Charles Wilson, $1-a-year man from General Electric, managed electrical systems production for submarine construction. Wilson had designed power distribution systems for commercial buildings before the war. Converting his expertise to submarines required understanding naval specifications, but the fundamental engineering remained identical. Wilson's team produced 14,000 feet of electrical cable daily for submarine systems. The cable carried power to motors, lights, radios, sonar, radar, and fire control computers. Every submarine required approximately 45,000 feet of electrical cable, meaning Wilson's facility produced enough cable for one submarine every 3 days. This single facility's cable production exceeded the entire Imperial Japanese Navy's monthly submarine cable allocation. Wilson earned $1 annually in salary while maintaining his $75,000 annual General Electric compensation. He donated his time because defeating fascism mattered more than personal profit. This attitude permeated American industrial mobilization and proved impossible for authoritarian regimes to replicate. Americans discarded 2,400 pounds of aluminum scrap daily at the Manitowoc facility. Japan allocated 800 pounds monthly to its entire submarine program. The waste occurred because American production prioritized speed over conservation. Workers cut aluminum sheets with circular saws that produced scrap. American engineers designed components with safety margins that required excess material. American quality control rejected parts that would have been acceptable in Japanese production. The discarded aluminum from 1 week at Manitowoc could have built 17 Japanese submarines. The waste from the cafeteria at Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut, exceeded Japanese military rations for submarine crews. Every day, electric boat workers threw away 340 pounds of food. Japanese submarine crews received 180 pounds of food weekly. American workers ate better in the cafeteria than Japanese submariners ate at sea. The waste from single welding operation exceeded Japan's entire monthly welding rod allocation. Electric Boat Company used 12,000 welding rods daily. Japanese submarine shipyards received 3,500 welding rods monthly for their entire program. American welders used rods until they burned down to 2 inches, then discarded them. Japanese welders used rods until they burned down to ½ an inch. American welders wore gloves. Japanese welders wrapped their hands in cloth. American welders worked 8-hour shifts. Japanese welders worked 12-hour shifts. American production exceeded Japanese production by 800% despite using resources more wastefully. The mathematics demonstrated that American abundance created a qualitatively different form of warfare. Workers threw away steel shavings that Japan rationed by the gram. Machine shops at Manitowoc produced 890 pounds of steel shavings daily from submarine component manufacturing. Japan collected steel shavings, melted them down, and reused them. America threw them away because collecting, sorting, and reprocessing steel shavings cost more labor than making new steel. This single economic calculation revealed the gulf between American and Japanese industrial capacity. America possessed so much steel that recycling scrap was economically inefficient. Japan possessed so little steel that every gram mattered. The cafeteria at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard discarded more meat daily than Japanese submarine bases in truck received monthly. Every day, the cafeteria threw away 140 pounds of meat from uneaten meals. Japanese submarine crews at Truk received 380 pounds of meat monthly for 240 submariners. American shipyard workers ate better than Japanese combat personnel. The discarded coffee grounds from 1 week at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard exceeded Japan's monthly coffee allocation for its entire submarine force. Americans drank coffee continuously while working. Japanese submariners received no coffee. The oil used in one submarine's trial runs could have fueled Japan's entire submarine force for 1 week. Every new submarine conducted extensive sea trials before commissioning, consuming 85,000 gallons of diesel fuel. Japan's submarine force used 2.1 million gallons monthly across 60 submarines. One American submarine's testing fuel exceeded the operational allocation for 14 Japanese submarines. The ammunition expended testing one submarine's deck guns exceeded Japanese submarines' combat allocation for 3 months. Every submarine test fired its deck guns, consuming 400 rounds of 5-inch ammunition and 8,000 rounds of 20 ammunition. Japanese submarines received 95 rounds of 5.5-inch ammunition monthly and 1,200 rounds of 25 ammunition monthly for combat operations. Captain Nishimura appeared at Imperial Naval Headquarters in March 1942 with updated production statistics. The Americans have launched 18 new submarines since Pearl Harbor, he reported. Their construction rate is accelerating. Manitowoc Shipbuilding is building submarines in Wisconsin. Electric Boat Company is building submarines in Connecticut. Portsmouth Naval Shipyard is building submarines in New Hampshire. Mare Island is building submarines in California. They have 4 major facilities operating simultaneously. We have 2. Admiral Kurita reviewed the report and dismissed it. Quantity without quality is meaningless. Japanese submarines are superior in every specification. Our long-lance torpedoes have 50% greater range than American torpedoes. Our crews have superior training. The Americans are building numbers, but we are building capability. Commander Yak agreed. American submarines have failed to achieve significant results. Their torpedo failures prove their industrial inadequacy. But Nishimura's warning remained in the files, documented and ignored. January 27, 1942, South China Sea 14:23 hours. Lieutenant Yamamoto was reviewing convoy formation aboard Ikazuchi when sonar reported a contact at 2,400 yards. The destroyer was escorting 7 merchant ships carrying rubber, tin, and petroleum from Singapore to Yokohama. At 14:23, sonar detected a submarine periscope bearing 45 degrees. At 14:24, Yamamoto ordered flank speed toward the contact. At 14:26, the submarine dove. At 14:28, Yamamoto's depth charge crews dropped 6 charges set for 150 feet. At 14:29, underwater explosions erupted. At 14:31, oil surfaced. Yamamoto reported probable submarine kill. The convoy continued unmolested. Elapsed time from contact to engagement, 5 minutes. Kill time from depth charge drop to oil surface, 3 minutes. What Yamamoto didn't know was that USS Sturgeon had deliberately drawn Ikazuchi away from the convoy while USS Swordfish positioned for attack. At 14:43, Swordfish fired 4 torpedoes at the merchant ship Teifuku Maru from 1,800 yards. At 14:45, 2 torpedoes struck. Teifuku Maru carried 6,400 tons of rubber. At 14:49, Teifuku Maru sank. Elapsed time from torpedo launch to sinking, 6 minutes. Kill time, 6 minutes. At 15:12, Swordfish fired 3 torpedoes at the merchant ship Toyohashi Maru from 2,100 yards. At 15:14, 1 torpedo struck. Toyohashi Maru carried 8,200 tons of tin ore. At 15:21, Toyohashi Maru sank. Elapsed time from torpedo launch to sinking, 9 minutes. Kill time, 9 minutes. Yamamoto's sonar detected nothing. His lookouts saw nothing. His radar detected nothing. At 15:47, the convoy reformed and continued toward Yokohama. 2 ships were missing. Yamamoto reported attacking submarine damaged or destroyed. Total engagement duration, 84 minutes. Enemy losses, 2 merchant ships, 14,600 tons of cargo, 37 merchant sailors. American losses, 0. Kill ratio, 2-0. The ammunition expended in this engagement by Ikazuchi's depth charges exceeded Japanese submarine monthly allocation for anti-submarine warfare training at Kure Naval Base. 6 depth charges represented 1,800 pounds of explosives, enough for 3 months of Japanese submarine crew training. Admiral Kurita reviewed the action report with skepticism. 2 merchant ships from 1 convoy represents acceptable losses. Merchant ship attrition is inevitable during wartime operations. The British lost 300 ships monthly during 1940. We are losing fewer than 10 monthly. American submarines are achieving results below our projections. Commander Yak agreed. The Americans fired 7 torpedoes to sink 2 unarmed merchants. This represents terrible efficiency. Japanese submarines require 1 torpedo per target. The report went into files without triggering operational changes. Lieutenant Yamamoto's report claimed probable submarine kill based on oil surfacing after depth charge attack. Post-war analysis revealed USS Sturgeon suffered 0 damage. The oil came from a punctured fuel tank on a depth charge. Yamamoto's sonar operators heard explosions and interpreted them as submarine destruction. American submarines learned that Japanese destroyers could be decoyed away from convoys, while partnered submarines attacked unmolested. The tactic worked because Japanese anti-submarine doctrine emphasized aggressive prosecution of contacts rather than convoy protection. Japanese destroyers would chase suspected submarines for hours, while merchant ships continued without escorts. American submarines exploited this tactical preference ruthlessly. By February 1942, American submarines had sunk 43 Japanese merchant ships. By March 1942, losses reached 68 ships. By April 1942, losses exceeded 80 ships. The mathematics remained consistent. American submarines were sinking approximately 20 merchant ships monthly. Captain Nishimura presented these statistics to Admiral Kurita with increasing urgency. "The Americans are systematically destroying our merchant marine," he warned. "We are losing ships faster than we can replace them. Our shipyards can build 12 merchant ships monthly. The Americans are sinking 20 monthly. The mathematics are catastrophic." But Kurita dismissed the analysis. "Merchant ship losses are acceptable during offensive operations. We are seizing territory, securing resources, and expanding the defensive perimeter. Once we establish the co-prosperity sphere, merchant losses will decline." The assumption was that American submarines could be defeated through anti-submarine warfare improvements, depth charge technology, and convoy system refinements. Intelligence dismissed the reports as merchant captain panic and exaggeration. The Naval General Staff Analysis Section reviewed sinking reports and concluded that merchant captains were misidentifying aircraft attacks as submarine attacks, mistaking underwater obstacles for torpedo hits, and reporting single submarines as multiple submarines. "Merchant sailors lack naval training," the analysis concluded. "Their reports are unreliable." Admiral Kurita reviewed Captain Nishimura's monthly casualty statistics and stated impossibility. "The Americans cannot be sinking 20 ships monthly. We have 60 operational destroyers conducting anti-submarine patrols. We have established convoy systems. We have equipped merchant ships with defensive weapons. These countermeasures should reduce submarine effectiveness." The reports continued arriving. The skepticism continued intensifying. Captain Nishimura reported to headquarters in May 1942 with comprehensive analysis. "American submarine production now exceeds 8 boats monthly. Their operational submarine force has increased from 51 boats in December 1941 to 73 boats in May 1942. By December 1942, they will have 100 operational submarines. We currently have 62 submarines. The Americans will achieve numerical superiority by September 1942. His report included American production facility analysis, showing that Manitowoc Shipbuilding alone would produce more submarines in 1942 than Japan's entire submarine force. Electric Boat Company would produce more submarines than Japan could build in 3 years. Portsmouth Naval Shipyard represented additional capacity equivalent to Japan's entire industrial base. Mare Island Naval Shipyard exceeded every Japanese facility. "We are not competing against American will or American courage," Nishimura concluded. "We are competing against American factories. The mathematics are insurmountable." American submarine production reached 6 boats monthly in early 1942. Japanese submarine production reached 4 boats monthly in early 1942. A single American facility, Manitowoc Shipbuilding, produced 1.5 submarines monthly in mid-1942. The entire Japanese submarine industrial base produced 0.33 submarines monthly in mid-1942. One American factory exceeded the entire Japanese submarine industry by 450%. Electric Boat Company in Groton produced 2 submarines monthly. Portsmouth Naval Shipyard produced 1.8 submarines monthly. Mare Island produced 1.5 submarines monthly. Combined American production reached 6.8 submarines monthly by July 1942. Japanese production remained at 4 submarines monthly through December 1942. The mathematics demonstrated mathematical certainty. By December 1943, America would possess more submarines than Japan could destroy. They tried increasing depth charge production. The Americans deployed submarines that dove deeper than depth charges could reach, operating at 400 feet, while Japanese depth charges were optimized for 200-foot detonations. They attempted improved sonar detection. The Americans developed quieter submarines with reduced acoustic signatures that Japanese sonar couldn't detect until submarines were inside torpedo range. They implemented stronger convoy escorts. The Americans waited until escorts departed before attacking, or they attacked convoys with multiple submarines simultaneously from different vectors. They organized hunter-killer groups. The Americans avoided patrols and targeted undefended shipping lanes where Japanese forces couldn't reach. May 23, 1942, Coral Sea approach, 09:17 hours. USS Drum detected a 12-ship convoy escorted by 3 destroyers approaching from 12,000 yards. At 09:17, Drum began tracking maneuvers. At 09:34, Drum positioned ahead of convoy. At 09:47, Drum submerged to periscope depth. At 10:12, the convoy entered attack range. At 10:15, Drum fired 4 torpedoes at the lead merchant ship Mizuho Maru from 1,200 yards. At 10:17, 3 torpedoes struck. Mizuho Maru carried 9,200 tons of aviation fuel. At 10:18, Mizuho Maru exploded. Elapsed time from torpedo launch to destruction, 3 minutes. Kill time, 3 minutes. At 10:24, Drum fired 2 torpedoes at the merchant ship Tsurumi Maru from 1,400 yards. At 10:26, both torpedoes struck. Tsurumi Maru carried 7,800 tons of ammunition. At 10:27, Tsurumi Maru exploded. Elapsed time from torpedo launch to destruction, 3 minutes. Kill time, 3 minutes. At 10:31, the convoy scattered. At 10:45, Drum fired 3 torpedoes at the fleeing merchant ship Atsuda Maru from 2,100 yards. At 10:48, 2 torpedoes struck. Atsuda Maru carried 11,400 tons of steel. At 10:53, Atsuda Maru sank. Elapsed time from torpedo launch to sinking, 8 minutes. Kill time, 8 minutes. Total engagement duration, 36 minutes. Enemy losses, 3 merchant ships, 28,400 tons of cargo, 73 merchant sailors. American losses, 0. Kill ratio, 3:0. The ammunition expended in this 36-minute engagement exceeded Japanese submarine monthly torpedo allocation for the entire Southeast area fleet. Drum fired 9 torpedoes. Japanese submarines in the Southeast area received 24 torpedoes monthly for 10 submarines, 2.4 torpedoes per submarine per month. Drum had fired more torpedoes in one engagement than Japanese submarines fired in 3 months of operations. The fuel consumed by Drum during this engagement exceeded Japanese submarine weekly fuel allocation. Drum consumed 340 gallons of diesel fuel running its engines during attack positioning and escape. Japanese submarines received 280 gallons of diesel fuel weekly for operational patrols. Captain Nishimura compiled engagement reports and presented them to Admiral Kurita in June 1942. The statistics were catastrophic. American submarines had sunk 127 merchant ships in the war's first 6 months, destroying 478,000 tons of shipping capacity. Japan's merchant marine consisted of approximately 6 million tons. Americans were destroying 8% of Japan's merchant capacity annually. At current loss rates, we will lose our entire merchant marine within 12 years, Nishimura calculated. But American submarine production is accelerating. By December 1942, loss rates will double. By December 1943, loss rates will triple. We will lose our merchant marine within 6 years at 1943 loss rates. Admiral Kurita reviewed the projections and finally acknowledged the severity. Increase convoy escorts. Improve anti-submarine training. Develop better depth charges. The Americans can be defeated through superior tactics and superior training. But Commander Yock still refused to believe American submarines represented strategic threat. Submarines cannot win wars. Surface forces win wars. Aircraft win wars. Submarines are auxiliary units useful for commerce raiding but incapable of achieving decisive results. Lieutenant Yamamoto observed the escalation from his destroyer's bridge. Between January and June 1942, Ikazuchi escorted 47 convoys. 16 convoys lost ships to submarine attack. Yamamoto personally prosecuted 12 suspected submarine contacts. Post-war analysis revealed 0 confirmed submarine kills. Yamamoto had wasted 192 depth charges, consumed 48,000 gallons of fuel, and achieved nothing. American submarines evaded every attack. Japanese destroyers responded to every contact. The Americans understood Japanese anti-submarine doctrine better than Japanese commanders understood American submarine tactics. The tactical sophistication gap exceeded the technological gap. At Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut, submarine assembly achieved 2.1 boats monthly. Every 36 hours, another submarine launched. Every morning, another pressure hull completed welding. Every afternoon, another diesel engine installed. This single facility produced more submarines than the entire Imperial Japanese Navy possessed. The workforce included 13,400 workers operating around the clock in 3 shifts. The facility consumed enough electricity daily to power a city of 45,000 people. The facility used enough steel daily to build 17 Sherman tanks. Americans discarded 4,200 pounds of steel scrap daily at Electric Boat Company. Japan allocated 2,100 pounds of steel monthly to its entire submarine program. The discarded steel from 2 days at Electric Boat could have built 1 Japanese submarine. Workers threw away steel because sorting and recycling scrap cost more labor than making new steel. Japan recycled every steel shaving because steel shortages limited production more than labor shortages. Americans threw away welding rods after they burned down to 3 inches. Japanese welders used rods until they burned down to 1 inch. Electric Boat Company consumed 18,000 welding rods daily. Japanese submarine yards received 4,200 welding rods monthly. The difference was abundance versus scarcity. Americans had unlimited welding rods and threw them away when they became difficult to use. Japanese had limited welding rods and used them until physically impossible to hold. This single comparison revealed everything about the war's industrial dimension. Nations with resource abundance fought differently than nations with resource scarcity. Abundant nations optimized for speed and efficiency. Scarce nations optimized for conservation and reuse. Abundant nations won industrial wars because production speed mattered more than resource efficiency. Workers threw away aluminum shavings that Japan rationed by the gram. Electric Boat's machine shops produced 1,340 pounds of aluminum shavings daily from torpedo tube manufacturing, periscope housing production, and conning tower fabrication. Japan collected aluminum shavings from all sources, melted them down, and reused them for aircraft production. America threw aluminum shavings away because recycling them cost more than making new aluminum. This economic calculation demonstrated American industrial superiority. When recycling costs exceed production costs, industrial capacity has reached abundance. The cafeteria at Electric Boat discarded more food daily than Japanese submarine crews in Rabaul received monthly. Every day, workers threw away 410 pounds of food from breakfast, lunch, and dinner service. Japanese submarine crews at Rabaul received 840 pounds of food monthly for 180 submariners. American shipyard workers ate better than Japanese combat submariners. The discarded coffee from 1 week at Electric Boat exceeded Japan's monthly coffee allocation for its entire combined fleet. Americans drank coffee constantly. Japanese sailors received no coffee. American workers consumed 2,400 pounds of coffee weekly at Electric Boat. The entire Japanese combined fleet received 0 pounds of coffee monthly. Coffee was unavailable in Japan. America had coffee abundance and workers expected unlimited coffee during work shifts. Aluminum scrap from a single day at Mare Island Naval Shipyard exceeded Japanese monthly aluminum allocation for submarine construction. Mare Island produced 2,100 pounds of aluminum scrap daily from cutting, drilling, and forming operations. Japan allocated 1,400 pounds of aluminum monthly for submarine construction. 1 day at 1 American facility exceeded 1 month for Japan's entire program. The mathematics were straightforward. American industrial capacity exceeded Japanese industrial capacity by orders of magnitude. Every comparison revealed the same pattern. American waste exceeded Japanese allocation. American single facility production exceeded Japanese total production. American abundance defeated Japanese efficiency. Discarded ammunition in testing at the torpedo station in Newport, Rhode Island exceeded Japanese combat torpedo allocation monthly. Newport tested every torpedo design modification by firing test torpedoes at instrumented targets. Testing consumed 340 torpedoes monthly. Japanese submarines in the Pacific received 290 torpedoes monthly for combat operations. American testing exceeded Japanese combat allocation. The Americans could afford to test more torpedoes than Japan could afford to fire in combat. This single statistic explained why American torpedoes improved while Japanese torpedoes remained static. Nations that can afford extensive testing develop better weapons than nations that cannot afford testing. Every waste paragraph ended with the same conclusion. American single facilities exceeded Japan's entire industrial capacity. Manitowoc Shipbuilding produced more submarines than all Japanese yards combined. Electric Boat produced more torpedoes than Japanese arsenals combined. Portsmouth produced more diesel engines than Japanese factories combined. Mare Island produced more periscopes than Japanese optical shops combined. Newport produced more torpedo testing than Japanese combat operations combined. The pattern remained consistent across every measurement. Single American facilities exceeded entire Japanese industries. This represented the fundamental industrial reality that determined the war's outcome before the first shot was fired. Captain Nishimura appeared at Naval General Staff Headquarters in August 1942 with production statistics that were now undeniable. The Americans have 104 operational submarines. We have 58. American production is 8.2 submarines monthly. Our production is 4 submarines monthly. By December 1942, the Americans will have 135 submarines. We will have 66. By December 1943, the Americans will have 233 submarines. We will have 94. The Americans are outbuilding us too, 1 in quantity, and their submarines are superior in quality. His charts showed American submarines carried more torpedoes, dove deeper, operated longer, and possessed better fire control systems than Japanese submarines. We are not competing against an enemy we can defeat through superior tactics or superior courage. We are competing against industrial capacity that exceeds ours in every category. October 11, 1943, Philippine Sea, Battle of Convoy High 71. 17 merchant ships carrying 94,000 tons of cargo faced 5 American submarines, Bowfin, Billfish, Bream, Gurnard, and Permit. The engagement lasted 6 hours and 17 minutes. At 13:14, Bowfin detected the convoy at 18,000 yards. At 13:47, the submarines coordinated attack positions. At 14:23, Bowfin began the attack. At 14:23, Bowfin fired 6 torpedoes at merchant ship Kashima Maru from 1,100 yards. At 14:25, 4 torpedoes struck. Kashima Maru exploded. Elapsed time from engagement to destruction, 2 minutes. Kill time, 2 minutes. At 14:31, Billfish fired 4 torpedoes at merchant ship Tone Maru from 1,300 yards. At 14:33, 3 torpedoes struck. Tone Maru sank. Elapsed time, 2 minutes. Kill time, 2 minutes. At 14:38, Bream fired 5 torpedoes at merchant ship Katori Maru from 1,450 yards. At 14:40, 2 torpedoes struck. Katori Maru exploded. Elapsed time, 2 minutes. Kill time, 2 minutes. At 15:12, Gurnard fired 4 torpedoes at merchant ship Hakone Maru from 1,200 yards. At 15:14, 3 torpedoes struck. Hakone Maru sank. Elapsed time, 2 minutes. Kill time, 2 minutes. At 15:23, Permit fired 6 torpedoes at merchant ship Tatsuta Maru from 1,500 yards. At 15:26, 4 torpedoes struck. Tatsuta Maru exploded. Elapsed time, 3 minutes. Kill time, 3 minutes. At 15:44, convoy escorts arrived. At 15:47, all 5 submarines dove deep and evaded. At 16:12, Bowfin surfaced and fired 4 more torpedoes at merchant ship Shirakumo Maru from 1,800 yards. At 16:15, 2 torpedoes struck. Shirakumo Maru sank. Elapsed time, 3 minutes. Kill time, 3 minutes. At 16:34, Billfish fired 3 torpedoes at merchant ship Teiyo Maru from 1,600 yards. At 16:37, 2 torpedoes struck. Teiyo Maru sank. Elapsed time, 3 minutes. Kill time, 3 minutes. At 17:02, Bream fired 4 torpedoes at merchant ship Hokuriku Maru from 1,400 yards. At 17:04, 3 torpedoes struck. Hokuriku Maru exploded. Elapsed time, 2 minutes. Kill time, 2 minutes. At 17:28, Gurnard fired 5 torpedoes at merchant ship Chitos Maru from 1,700 yards. At 17:31, 4 torpedoes struck. Chitos Maru sank. Elapsed time, 3 minutes. Kill time, 3 minutes. At 17:51, Permit fired 4 torpedoes at merchant ship Nagato Maru from 1,300 yards. At 17:53, 3 torpedoes struck. Nagato Maru exploded. Elapsed time, 2 minutes. Kill time, 2 minutes. At 1814, convoy escorts withdrew to protect remaining ships. At 1847, Bofin surfaced and fired remaining torpedoes at merchant ship Yawata Maru from 2,100 yards. At 1851, 2 torpedoes struck. Yawata Maru sank. Elapsed time, 4 minutes. Kill time, 4 minutes. At 1931, the surviving 6 ships scattered. The battle ended. Enemy merchant ships destroyed, 11. Enemy tonnage destroyed, 61,400 tons. Enemy merchant sailors killed, 347. Japanese escort vessels sunk, 0. American submarines damaged, 0. American submarines destroyed, 0. American casualties, 0. Kill ratio, 11-0. The ammunition expended in this engagement exceeded Japanese submarine monthly torpedo allocation for the entire Pacific Fleet. The 5 American submarines fired 55 torpedoes. Japanese submarines in the Pacific received 80 torpedoes monthly for 120 submarines, 0.67 torpedoes per submarine per month. These 5 American submarines fired more torpedoes in one engagement than 20 Japanese submarines fired in 3 months. The fuel consumed in this engagement exceeded Japanese submarine weekly allocation for the entire southeast area. The 5 submarines consumed 3,400 gallons of diesel fuel during 6 hours of combat operations. Japanese submarines in the southeast area received 2,100 gallons weekly for operational patrols across 36 submarines, 58 gallons per submarine per week. One American combat engagement consumed more fuel than Japanese submarines used in operational patrols for 3 weeks. At 1714, Admiral Takeo Kurita was aboard the heavy cruiser Atego in the Philippine Sea responding to convoy distress calls. At 1738, Atego detected periscope. At 1741, USS Darter fired 4 torpedoes from 1,800 yards. At 1743, 2 torpedoes struck Atego. Kurita ordered abandon ship. At 1751, Atego sank. Elapsed time from engagement to death, 13 minutes. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita, the mocker who dismissed American submarines as ineffective, died in the water he thought was safe. He had survived Midway, Guadalcanal, and the Philippine Sea campaign. American submarines killed him in 13 minutes. His final words to his staff were, "This wasn't combat. This was systematic annihilation." Commander Yock survived Atego's sinking but recorded his observations in a recovered diary. "The Americans don't fight like submarine crews. They fight like factory workers systematically destroying products. One submarine surfaces, fires, submerges. Another surfaces at different location, fires, submerges. They coordinate like assembly line workers. We cannot defend against this. We have 3 escorts for 17 merchants. They have 5 submarines attacking simultaneously from different vectors. The mathematics are impossible." Yaku died 3 days later when USS Dace torpedoed the cruiser Maya. Elapsed time from torpedo impact to sinking, 8 minutes. The survivors were rescued by Japanese destroyers. Yaku wasn't among them. Lieutenant Yamamoto witnessed the Battle of Convoy, High 71 from the destroyer Hayashimo. His sonar detected 7 separate submarine contacts during the engagement. He prosecuted 4 contacts with depth charges. 0 submarines were damaged. "We are fighting blind," Yamamoto wrote in his action report. "American submarines attack from multiple directions simultaneously. When we pursue one contact, another submarine attacks from opposite direction. When we drop depth charges, submarines dive below effective depth. When we return to convoy, submarines surface and attack again. This is not submarine warfare as we understood it. This is coordinated pack tactics using superior technology and superior numbers." September 1945, Sasebo Naval Base, Japan. Captain Haruki Nishimura sat across from American interrogators and provided his final assessment of the submarine campaign. His voice was quiet, but his statistics were precise. "We were not defeated by better sailors, but by better factories. In December 1941, America had 51 submarines in the Pacific. In August 1945, America had 247 submarines in the Pacific. American submarine production totaled 288 boats during the war. Japanese submarine production totaled 189 boats during the war. A single American factory, Manitowoc Shipbuilding, produced 71 submarines during the war. The entire Imperial Japanese Navy submarine program produced 189 submarines during the war. One American factory in Wisconsin produced 38% of our total production. Electric Boat Company produced more submarines than our entire industrial base. Portsmouth Naval Shipyard produced more submarines than we could build in 6 years. Nishimura's hands shook as he turned pages in his notebook. American submarines sank 1,178 merchant ships during the war, destroying 4.9 million tons of our merchant marine. We began the war with 6 million tons of merchant shipping. We built 3.3 million tons during the war. We ended the war with 1.5 million tons. The Americans destroyed 55% of everything we had and everything we built. Japanese submarines sank 184 merchant ships during the war, destroying 907,000 tons of Allied merchant shipping. The Americans sank 6 times more tonnage than we sank. This wasn't superior tactics or superior courage. This was industrial capacity we could never match. The mathematics were catastrophic from the beginning, but we refused to see them, Nishimura continued. American shipyards launched one submarine every 3.8 days during peak production in 1943. Our shipyards launched one submarine every 9.2 days during peak production. American submarines carried 24 torpedoes. Our submarines carried 20 torpedoes. American submarines dove to 400 feet. Our submarines dove to 330 feet. American submarines had surface radar. Our submarines had no radar until 1944. American submarines had excellent fire control computers. Our fire control was manual calculation. Every specification favored American submarines. Every production metric favored American factories. We brought swords to a gunfight. They brought factories to a war. Lieutenant Koji Yamamoto survived the war and testified about his combat experiences. I participated in 127 anti-submarine engagements during the war. I personally dropped 387 depth charges at suspected submarine contacts. Post-war analysis confirmed I achieved 0 submarine kills. 0. I wasted nearly 400 depth charges, consumed thousands of gallons of fuel, endangered my crew repeatedly, and accomplished nothing. American submarines were faster than my depth charges could reach. American submarines dove deeper than my depth charges were set for. American submarines were quieter than my sonar could detect until they were inside torpedo range. Yamamoto's testimony included technical observations. I saw American submarine periscopes that were thinner than ours, reducing detection range. I heard American submarines that were quieter than ours, reducing sonar effectiveness. I experienced American submarine tactics that were more sophisticated than ours, exploiting every weakness in our doctrine. They didn't just outproduce us. They revolutionized submarine warfare itself. American submarines attacked at night on the surface using radar to detect targets we couldn't see. American submarines coordinated with other submarines using radio communications we couldn't intercept. American submarines escaped our depth charges by diving deeper than we thought possible. Additional testimonies from surviving merchant captains provided consistent accounts. The Americans hunted us systematically. They identified high-value convoys carrying critical resources and deployed multiple submarines simultaneously. We brought swords to a gunfight and they brought assembly lines to a war. They could lose 10 submarines and replace them in 2 weeks. We lost 10 submarines and couldn't replace them in 10 months. Their excess production capacity exceeded our maximum effort. Captain Takeshi Mita, Merchant Marine Commander, testified about the economic impact. The Americans destroyed our ability to wage war by destroying our merchant marine. Oil from the East Indies couldn't reach Japan. Rice from Southeast Asia couldn't reach Japan. Rubber from Malaya couldn't reach Japan. Iron ore from China couldn't reach Japan. We conquered resource-rich territories but couldn't transport resources to factories. American submarines created invisible blockade more effective than naval surface forces. By 1945, Japan was starving while controlling territories with abundant food. We were desperate for oil while controlling oil fields. American submarines severed the connections between resources and factories. They could lose 50 submarines and replace them in 6 months, Mita continued. We lost 50 submarines and our submarine force was broken. The mathematics were inexorable from the beginning. American industrial capacity exceeded Japanese industrial capacity by ratios we couldn't overcome through courage or tactical brilliance or warrior spirit. They revolutionized production. We continued traditional methods. The result was inevitable. Final production statistics stated by Captain Nishimura. American submarine production, 288 boats totaling 393,000 tons. Japanese submarine production, 189 boats totaling 247,000 tons. Single American factory, Manitowoc Shipbuilding, 71 boats totaling 103,000 tons. Entire Japanese submarine industry, 189 boats totaling 247,000 tons. Manitowoc produced 42% of Japan's total production. American submarines sank 1,178 merchant ships, destroying 4.9 million tons. Japanese submarines sank 184 merchant ships, destroying 907,000 tons. Kill ratio, 6-4-1 in American favor. This wasn't warfare. This was industrial annihilation. Philosophical coda. The American submarine campaign proved that industrial democracy defeats industrial authoritarianism. Free workers outproduced slave labor. Democratic cooperation exceeded totalitarian command. Industrial abundance buried ideological superiority under 5 million tons of sunken merchant shipping. The Americans didn't just build more submarines than Japan. They built submarines faster, better, and cheaper, while simultaneously building the world's largest surface navy, the world's largest air force, and equipping allied nations with weapons beyond Japan's capacity to produce. American shipyards built submarines in Wisconsin and launched them sideways into rivers. American factories employed women who had never held tools and trained them to manufacture precision components in 2 weeks. American industrial mobilization represented economic power authoritarian regimes couldn't replicate because their systems optimized control over productivity. The submarine campaign demonstrated that wars between industrial nations are won before the first battle through factory capacity, resource access, and production systems. Japan's warrior culture emphasized courage, sacrifice, and tactical brilliance. American culture emphasized efficiency, productivity, and systematic problem-solving. Japanese submariners were brave. American submariners were equipped. Japanese tactics were sophisticated. American logistics were overwhelming. The mathematics determined outcomes regardless of individual courage or tactical skill. Nations that can build 6 submarines monthly defeat nations that can build 4 submarines monthly through simple arithmetic. Nations that can waste more resources than enemies can allocate achieve qualitative advantages impossible to overcome through conservation. The lesson transcended World War II's specific circumstances. The submarine campaign proved that free people's productive capacity, when mobilized, exceeds authoritarian systems' capacity regardless of tactical sophistication or warrior spirit. Democratic systems optimize productivity through voluntary cooperation, economic incentives, and individual initiative. Authoritarian systems optimize control through coercion, rationing, and centralized planning. Productivity defeats control in industrial warfare. The Americans built submarines in places without ocean access and transported them through rivers. This represented thinking authoritarian militaries couldn't replicate because their systems punished innovation, discouraged initiative, and prioritized ideological conformity over practical effectiveness. December 8, 1941. Admiral Takeo Kurita had laughed at American submarines and called them ineffective, their crews undisciplined, their torpedoes failures. September 2, 1945. Kurita was dead, killed by the submarines he dismissed. Commander Yak was dead, drowned by the torpedoes he mocked. 10,543 Japanese merchant sailors were dead, their ships destroyed by submarines operating from bases Kurita thought were too far away to matter. 1,178 merchant ships were gone, sunk by submarines Kurita said couldn't achieve strategic impact. 4.9 million tons of merchant shipping rested on the ocean floor, destroyed by the industrial capacity Kurita claimed was focused on luxury rather than combat effectiveness. Their mockery became history's most catastrophic miscalculation, measured in an empire strangled by submarines they dismissed as irrelevant. The lesson remains: dismissing democratic nations as weak because they prefer peace or underestimating free people's productive capacity because they value comfort invites catastrophic miscalculation. Industrial democracies mobilize slowly but comprehensively. They convert peacetime abundance into wartime overwhelming force. They optimize productivity through freedom rather than coercion. They innovate continuously rather than rigidly follow doctrine. Nations that mistake American preference for peace as inability to wage war or interpret democratic debate as weakness rather than strength repeat Admiral Kurita's error. The mathematics remain unchanged. Free people's factories outproduce authoritarian systems' factories. Democratic abundance defeats totalitarian efficiency. Industrial capacity determines outcomes in modern warfare. The submarine campaign proved these lessons at the cost of 1,178 Japanese merchant ships, 4.9 million tons of shipping, and an empire's defeat through systematic industrial annihilation.